Hello, Internet, and welcome to another Wednesday's Serial. It has been a minute. A lot of life has been going on, but also a lot of comic book reading has been going on. So I want to hit with a handful of episodes talking about some things I've read recently. And one of the more exciting things I've read recently is the more recent Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan. And reading through this, I've heard so many people talk about what an exciting series it's been for them, and I'm glad it hit for them. For me, I'm glad I waited because I've had a little personal growth that allows me to appreciate the character more, and also getting a chunk of the character at once really helped me appreciate the character in a light that I don't think I would have if I had tried to read it when the character was just hitting. So I want to dig into some of my thoughts about that. One of the hardest things for me to grapple with when talking about this Miss Marvel is that she's an inhuman character. Not inhuman character, she's part of the Inhumans. God, I hate that title. I hate the Inhumans overall. Most of the stories I find relatively boring, and Kamala Khan's happens to be one of the few that I think works. But I think a large part of that is she's just treated as her own superhero, and much more weight is put on her picking up the legacy of the Miss Marvel and the Captain Marvel kind of deal. And I think that's much more exciting. But her ties to the Inhumans do play a role, and for where Marvel's been recently, a somewhat pivotal one. And I think that's pretty cool. But it also means, and this is something we see that develops very quickly for Kamala Khan in a way that a lot of more classic Marvel heroes didn't, is she is very quickly integrated into the Mayu of the Marvel Universe. And I know that this has been met with a fair amount of backlash by a lot of people, but I think it really works because I don't think characters can sit on their own and yet feel like a Marvel character at the same time. So Wilson, the writer, is clearly putting a lot of heart and soul into this book, whereas this is Miss Marvel and part of a property. There's something about this character that I don't feel, even with some of the rash of new characters, I feel this Miss Marvel has a kind of energy to her that we haven't gotten from a quote unquote new Marvel character in a good long while. There is something fresh going on here, yet very much paying respects to what made the superheroes of old. I've heard a lot of people say this, and I agree. The energy going on with this original Miss Marvel hits certain things that kind of happened in the. Most people are saying Spider-Man. I feel it more closely hits kind of the wave of superheroes, the New Warriors and the ilk, that came more directly after the idea of what Spider-Man was had been defined. And just kind of that hero that is bogged down by their personal life, and the heroism is almost an escape in a way, but the personal lessons come through. And I know some people feel that the lessons are a bit heavy-handed. There's an issue where she goes out and she meets some boy, and he seems so great and more or less parent approved, but he's kind of a bad, but whatever. But it turns out he's actually a bad guy working with someone to try to do harm to the city, and she's really taken aback, and there were warning signs, but at the time it was smaller, and then as it builds she reacts appropriately to each situation. But whereas we've seen that kind of thing with the girl that ends up being kind of the bad girl before, there is kind of a tone and tenor with this being a young female character that's different, and it's cool to get that. I don't know. And I say that more so, like, we have Riri Williams and we've had, other characters in this line, but I feel Miss Marvel's hitting that note in a way that I haven't seen any of the other characters hit it. Even like the the new younger Batgirl doesn't hit that in the same way, in a way that I think works. So I think it's really cool, and I feel like this is, if you're looking for that sort of thing, this is the comic to go for. Also, to that note, I feel like the high school is alright, but in a weird way, it's not the super sappy, predictable kind of Archie-esque high school. You have the character of, say, Zoe Zimmer, who's kind of the bully at first, but she has a complete reversal around the time. And I think one of the weirdest parts in the Miss Marvel comic was dealing with the last days with the Marvel reset, which was weird because, the book's starting to get legs, and they throw it out from under them, but then effectively not much changes, and you kind of have to parse what did and didn't get changed, because they were able to kind of play off something with the secret identity and then snatch it back, just to tell a story, which, what could be more Spider-Man than that, right? But, so, I don't know, but you see Zoe Zimmer, and she very quickly becomes a fairly altruistic person. Given the heightened level of events going on, I don't think it's a bad character development, but it does kind of mean Miss Marvel doesn't have ongoing antagonists in the same way that could belie problems for her ongoing presence, because heroes are only good as their villains, and that might be one of the weaker points of the Miss Marvel books, is that they pull from a lot of Marvel lore, but she hasn't gotten many of her own, enemies. She's had a couple, but they haven't had the veracity of a lizard or a goblin or a Magneto or something. Um, yeah. Also, to the love life thing, there was this interesting arc with a character called Bruno, who was someone who was really good friends with her and wanted to make something more, and Kamala didn't, and then eventually he finds someone else, but then she feels bad about it, and it's these kind of sticky feelings, and it's a very common romance thing that happens that I don't think we've seen, and certainly haven't seen from the girl's perspective, in a mainstream superhero comic. Maybe I'm wrong. Please point it out if it has existed before, but it's certainly not common. And it's just one of those, low-hanging drama fruits that hadn't been plucked somehow, and here it is. I just thought that was pretty cool to finally see and kind of get another different perspective again from the romance angle. And then I'd say one of the biggest and more controversial points, I guess, of this comic is the religious aspect. Kamala Khan, is from a Muslim family and has a Muslim presence. Her mom and dad are present, but they're almost the least of that. In a way, they're Muslim parents, and so that has their effects, but it feels like more of the weight of this relies with Mir, who's her brother, who is really late into religion and is kind of making his family suffer. Even his parents think he's doing a bit much, but he is a very religious character, and that's kind of his point, is to kind of push some of that in a little bit. You could argue that's an agenda. It's also a perspective we don't get, and that's clearly something that is a passion of the authors. And I think it's cool that we get to see that, but it is balanced by pretty much every other character. There was a great issue where Kamala's dealing with the mosque, and she's talking to Sheikh Abdullah. I'm probably saying it wrong. But she pushes back and says, in other mosques, the girls don't have to stand behind this partition so that they can be seen, and that it's hard for her to pick up the lessons that they're saying because she can't see the person speaking and all that. She ends up sneaking out. Kamala herself is part of this religion, but much more on a level that I think most people who are born to parents of a certain religion would go through it. It's part of who they are, but it's a part of who they are, and they're not incredibly devout in any ways. It's just their family and their family's practices and their community. And I think that's a big thing. But she pushes back against that. But at the same time, she later seeks out the Sheik and asks him for advice about how to deal with mentorship and whatnot, because she's struggling with becoming a better superhero and she knows she needs help, but when she needs guidance, this is one of the people she turns to because it's a religious figure that she's grown up with, and it makes sense. It makes sense for the character, and everything is done to the book, but it's not shy about going about it. And I think that's rare. The only other character, at least in the Marvel universe, that I can think of that really lays into the religion like this, and certainly not in a way that's as consistent, is Daredevil. But Daredevil has the Catholic angle, but he's, well, a New York practicing Catholic, right? I don't think we've actually gotten a clear vision of a religious superhero like this in a way that fits a character well, which actually makes, again, Miss Marvel hit a level that very few superheroes do and very few newer superheroes do. And I think that might account for a lot of the pushback, is that some people read this and they feel like it's an agenda. But if you actually sit down and read the book and take it at the value that it presents itself with, this is a character, this is an important part of the character, and between the female aspect and the religious aspect swirled in, I guess it's a shock for some people. But if you're looking for new characters that with different perspectives on life, what an amazing story. What an amazing way to read and gain some knowledge and understand more about how some other people live. And I think that's really pretty cool. And I need to stop for a second because we need to get to the last and final bit, which is actually the superhero part. So it's kind of crazy to me, but I mean, very little of what I've mentioned is actually the superheroics and where most of the book actually lives. The thing is like any good solo book in my mind, in my taste as well, you care more about the personal moments, and they seem to constantly get interrupted. And sometimes you wish a few of the issues let the superhero side go so that you could get the personal development and the personal drama and the side characters have more time than dealing with the villain of the week. But Miss Marvel's had some great churns. The first being that when she initially gets her powers, it's through the Terrigen Mist. That's how Inhumans get their powers, because Inhumans are stupid. And she gets embiggening powers. Or shrinking powers. She can kind of morph her body to whatever it needs to be, which also has some incidentals like some healing. And initially she's doing it because she's enamored with the Miss Marvel of old, because that was someone who saved her town directly, which makes a lot of cool sense and creates a nice kind of lineage of why these characters don't necessarily know each other, which is something else I particularly love, because it's not this genetic family, nepotism passed down, which is so often tried to be played into these superhero things, especially in odd ways with Batman, but neither here nor there. I like the fact that it's this organic growth, that these characters affect other characters, and that has consequences, good and ill. And so, she muddles through, takes care of some supervillains, meets up with some others. And there's a really cool churn in Civil War II where this idea of registration, which tends to affect minority communities more negatively than it does more affluent communities, forces Miss Marvel to go against Captain Marvel, who's pushing this precog idea and how that would be laid out, because it's good for people on one side of something, but not on another necessarily, where it's abused, which is something that has happened. And I like the churn there, What I don't like is that it's been a while since Civil War II, and I don't think we've seen that tension played off of or this resolved in any way, because I feel like these characters, whereas they shouldn't have any weird retconny changes, I feel like they should be closer now, and that they should be touching base through some Avengers connection more often, because I feel like there's a cool dynamic between the two, because Kamala's kind of the fangirl character who knows all these characters and what they are, not in the Gwenpool way, but in a cool in-universe way. But with Captain Marvel, I mean, she knows the most about her, but she has this kind of respect. But now that it's kind of been broken, after that, I feel like she really came into her own. It's one of the greatest moments I've seen used for an event to help develop a character forward. And I don't know, I just think it's really interesting to see that churn, and I wish it was played off of, because there's just so much substance there. Another really cool churn was early on when Wolverine was Logan Wolverine and was near death but not there yet. There was an encounter with Miss Marvel, and he was he gave her the thumbs up basically, which kind of gave her a green light to the community, which I thought was a cool passing, and it totally fit. Kamala totally has the personality that would be like a Kitty Pryde or a Jubilee, and I don't know, but just in a completely different way, and Wolverine responding to that, and her personality just fit in a way that I wouldn't have seen at first, in a way made me respect the character too, because I was pretty early in, and it really paid off in a way that I've rarely seen those kinds of team ups work as well. It was just a fun little ride. And then there was another big churn where the Inhumans were pushing for certain things, and Kamala, while respectful to that and understanding where the humans were, pushed back. Very similar to the way she pushed back to her religion. There's this clear connection that her as Miss Marvel is also her as herself, and it's just kind of the superhero versus the human side. And she goes throughout, she walks the same way, and it's just really cool to see that she pushes back against that, but in a respectful manner. And it's a way that I feel like people often say superheroes contort themselves, but very often when you get to any political moment, they don't. But this was a situation where she really did try to talk things through first. She really tried to go the other way, and then she was pushed because other people feel it's more dire than she is, because she's so used to seeing people disagree that she's willing to let a disagreement be a disagreement first. And I don't know, it was something where I thought, here's a character that really hits what a superhero is, up and down, new and fresh, has all these different angles to the character. And now that she's, had a couple years under her belt, I mean, this is one of Marvel's best new characters, and it's going to be really exciting to see where she goes. And I'm hoping that their staying power past the initial creators and allows to keep moving on forward in the Marvel Universe, because the Marvel Universe is better off for having one more in there. So, yeah, that was a good long ramble, and I'll try to hit up with some more soon. Thanks, and I'll catch you later. Peace.